9. The long-lost island of gold. Starting as far back as the 7th century, a wealthy and powerful port city called Srivijaya controlled trade along the Straits of Malacca, which functioned as a vital commercial link between the east and the west. Located on a small island, the thriving ancient metropolis was ruled by a succession of powerful kings until 1025 AD, when India's Chola dynasty broke the city's power. Trading continued at Srivijaya for the next 2 centuries, but the city's influence and culture gradually declined and eventually slipped into obscurity. There are almost no remaining traces of Srivijaya today, but possible signs of it have started to turn up in surprising numbers in recent years. While no archaeological excavations have been carried out, divers have recovered dozens of artifacts from Indonesia's Musi River. These finds include figurines, temple bells, tools, and ceramics. They've also found coins, jewelry, wine jugs, musical instruments, sword hilts, and many other items. Many of these relics are made from gold and precious gems, suggesting that the area was once defined by vast wealth. The discoveries strongly suggest that the lost city has been found, but the artifacts are being sold on the global antiquities market and they're disappearing fast. Without any official scientific exploration, it's impossible to know for sure whether the objects were left behind by the people of Srivijaya or if they belong to another unknown culture that is yet to be identified and studied. Understanding that time is of the essence, scientists are finally making an effort to study the area. They have little physical evidence to go on when it comes to the city's known physical remnants, other than some brick temples and inscriptions. Being able to examine some artifacts in depth would give experts an unprecedented opportunity to learn about the society that once ruled the region. 8. Mysterious shipwreck. In early 2020, Polish archaeologists announced the discovery of a large, centuries-old shipwreck at the bottom of the Vistula River near the city of Warsaw. Measuring 121 feet long and nearly 20 feet wide, the ship could date as far back as the 14th century, when Poland was Western Europe's primary grain supplier. The archaeologists who found the ship believe it was a river-faring type of cargo vessel called a punt, and that it may have been capable of transporting up to 100 tons of grain and other goods at a time. The team discovered the otherwise undetectable wreck in the river's muddy water using sonar. Because visibility is so limited, they were unable to identify any artifacts related to the punt, including the cargo it may have been carrying. But according to archaeologist Artur Brzozowska, any goods that the vessel took to its watery grave are likely long gone anyway. Artur told Polish press agency PAP that he wasn't counting on finding much in the wreckage, even if the team managed to get a closer look at the boat. They took some samples of its wood to determine the mysterious wreck's exact age in hopes of gleaning some rudimentary details about its history, but unfortunately, nothing else has been released about the ship. 7. A mammoth femur. As regular divers in southwestern Florida's Peace River, Derek Demeter and Henry Sadler were used to finding fossils of extinct animals, teeth and bone fragments belonging to prehistoric creatures. However, they were shocked to find an intact 4-foot-long leg bone from a mammoth in 2021. The pair uncovered the ancient femur or thigh bone from beneath a layer of sand on the riverbed. While the age of the bone is unclear, it's possible that it belonged to a Columbian mammoth, a hybrid species that commonly wandered as far south as Costa Rica during the last ice age. DNA research suggests that the Columbian mammoth was a hybrid between the woolly mammoth and an undiscovered lineage that made its way from Siberia to North America around 1.5 million years ago. Based on the femur's measurements, the mammoth it belonged to may have stood 14 feet tall, and it likely weighed as much as 22,000 pounds. And while Demeter and Sadler have donated numerous artifacts to the Florida Museum of Natural History, Sadler decided to keep the leg bone in his classroom at the middle school where he teaches. In other words, it was just too cool to part with, but he also wanted to use it to engage his students in lessons about Florida's ancient history. 6. Tamar River Ship Graveyard. An estimated 1,000 shipwrecks litter the waters around the Australian island of Tasmania. At least 14 of them can be found in the Tamar River in the state's northern region in an area that's simply known as the burial ground. The vessels were deliberately sunk in a line between the 1920s and the 1970s in an effort to create more flow in the river, which is notorious for silting up. This was just one of numerous projects that the Australian government poured millions of dollars into as part of its efforts to resolve the problem. The Tamar has been called the river that flows upside down by the locals. The so-called burial ground consists of mostly wooden vessels, including a 3-masted sailing ship called the Zelatur. They were burned to the waterline, and then they were sunk in hopes that they would force the river's current to divert eastward. Whether or not the project was a success remains a topic of debate to this day. Either way, the ship's effectiveness as barriers wasn't expected to last forever. Eventually, the hulls rusted away and the wood collapsed. Then, the river's current overpowered what's left of the vessels, which represent just a fraction of the estimated 115 wrecks that were discarded throughout Tasmania's waterways between the early 19th century and the late 20th century. 5. Confederate warship. In 2013, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers began raising a long-forgotten Civil War-era ship from the Savannah River, where the Confederate military deliberately scuttled it to prevent from falling into Northern hands. Known as the CSS Georgia, the 250-foot-long wooden vessel was built in 1862 with funding from a group of merchants' wives known as the Ladies' Gunboat Society. These women collected donations from benefactors throughout the South. Despite its solid financial backing, the ship failed to serve its intended purpose. Its steam engines were too weak to power it through the Savannah River's strong tidal waters, so the Confederate Navy parked it upstream and used it as a floating battery for defending the city against Union forces. When Confederate leaders learned that the Union troops were advancing toward the city under General William T. Sherman in 1864, they sank the CSS Georgia. The wreck was rediscovered in 1968. By the time salvaging efforts began 45 years later, much of the ship was destroyed. Crews nevertheless raised some fascinating artifacts from the recovery, including 4 cannons, more than 130 unexploded cannonballs, some engine parts, an intact propeller, and siding. They pulled what's left of the ship from the river in 10,000-pound sections, measuring roughly 4 by 24 feet. Experts are studying the retrieved portions of the Georgia to learn more about Confederate shipbuilding practices, which involved different techniques than the more industrialized North. If you discovered the remains of a creature in a river that had never before been seen by science, what would you call it? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. 4. Gargantuan goldfish. If you had a somewhat typical American childhood, there's a slight chance that you won a goldfish at your local fair at some point and wound up flushing it down the toilet, or at least you knew someone who did. And it's possible that the fish was still alive when it was sucked into the plumbing and forgotten about. You may be surprised to learn that a lot of flushed goldfish survive their trip down the tubes and wind up living, sometimes even thriving, in whatever local body of water they end up in. In 2019, an employee from the non-profit Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper discovered a 14-inch goldfish in the Niagara River in upstate New York. The fish, however, may not have been flushed down someone's toilet. It was most likely discarded or released by a human as an unwanted pet or to escape from a fisher's bait bucket. While goldfish that are confined to aquariums typically only grow to 1 to 2 inches long, those that are released into the wild often reach lengths of 12 to 14 inches, and in some cases they grow even longer. Goldfish are native to Asia and are considered invasive when they make their way into the environment in North America. They reproduce rapidly and are capable of surviving year-round in and around the Great Lakes. And in large enough numbers, they have the potential to disrupt or even wreak havoc on local wildlife. Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper estimates that there are currently tens of millions of goldfish living throughout the Great Lakes. In a Facebook post, the organization encouraged anyone with a goldfish they don't want or can't take care of to return it to the pet store, find a new owner, or do whatever else they can to avoid flushing it or releasing it into the wild. 3. Centuries-old cargo ship. While carrying a shipment of lime near the mouth of Germany's River Trave around 400 years ago, a cargo ship ran aground on a shoal and was quickly buried in a layer of fine mud. It remained forgotten about until 2020, when authorities spotted it during a routine sonar survey of the region. Measuring somewhere between 66 and 82 feet long, the vessel may have been a single-masted cargo ship called a galliot. Its identity is a mystery, but it was most likely one of the countless 17th century vessels that frequently traveled along the River Trave. During the Hanseatic period between the 13th century to the middle of the 15th century, the guilds and towns of northern Germany made up a successful bloc known as the Hanse, or the Hanseatic League. At the time, the Hanse dominated the continent's trading industry throughout the North and Baltic Seas. Very few ships from the Hanseatic period have survived into modern times. Most have been destroyed by the elements and eaten away by shipworms, a fate that recently discovered cargo vessels managed to escape. The mud it was buried in protected it from both the forces of nature and the destruction of shipworms, leaving it remarkably well preserved. Divers found around 150 wooden barrels filled with quicklime, which was used in construction. According to maritime archaeologist Fritz Jurgens, the lime would have come from somewhere in Scandinavia, most likely from central Sweden or northern Denmark. The cargo was on its way to Lübeck in northern Germany, where it would have been in high demand due to the area's lack of natural limestone resources. Researchers uncovered a letter from the wreckage that was written in 1680. It contained a request for some cargo to be recovered from a ship that had run aground in the river. They believe the message is referencing the recently discovered ship, which was built with trees that were felled during the 1650s. In the near future, they're planning to raise the wreck in hopes of maintaining its astonishingly intact state and to prevent any danger to modern shipping in the region. 2. A monster sturgeon. While conducting a sturgeon survey in Michigan's Detroit River in 2021, a group of biologists reeled in a massive female sturgeon thought to be more than 100 years old. It took 3 team members to haul in the 7-foot-long, 240-pound creature, which they later described as a real-life river monster. The Fish and Wildlife Service described it as one of the largest lake sturgeons ever caught in the U.S. Even the scientists who captured the gargantuan fish were shocked by its size, which they later said was at least twice as large as any fish previously caught in the area. After measuring and tagging it, they released it back into the river. Perhaps even more surprising than its size is the fact that the sturgeon managed to evade detection by scientific surveys for more than 20 years before its discovery. This could be because sturgeons tend to spend most of their time near the bottoms of the rivers and lakes they live in, feeding on small fish and other bottom-dwelling prey. The species is considered threatened in nearly all 20 of the states it's found in due to numerous factors. These include pollution, dams, and other man-made structures that prevent fish from accessing its spawning grounds, and past commercial fishing that saw the sturgeon killed off in droves. To find a specimen as large as the one the researchers caught in 2021 was incredibly unlikely, even as the local population's numbers become increasingly healthy through conservation efforts. Number 1. Aaron's Mississippi River Barge. In late 2022, a middle schooler from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, named Aaron Benkaz stumbled upon what seemed like an old shipwreck on a sandbar while walking his dog along the Mississippi River. He was thrilled to tell his friends at school and was shocked when they didn't believe him. Aaron figured that if his peers were skeptical, his teachers would definitely think he was making the story up, so he didn't tell them. But the word got around to adults and caught the attention of local archaeologists, who visited the site and confirmed that the young man was telling the truth. The wreck was officially dubbed Aaron's Shipwreck, but the wooden vessel is in poor shape. State archaeologist Chip McGimsey told The Advocate that it's unclear what kind of boat it is, but that it may have been a barge. McGimsey speculated that it was built sometime after 1880 and that it likely measured roughly 50 feet long and 20 feet wide. But until more research is carried out, nobody can state any facts with any certainty. Aaron discovered the mysterious wreck at a time when the Mississippi River's water levels were lower than usual. Much of the wreck remained underwater, so McGimsey made plans to return to the site at a later time when water levels were projected to decrease even more. Which of these river discoveries shocked you the most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.